I thought I would start by sharing how I started this journey of learning how disease has spiritual roots. I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism 20 years ago now. I took it in stride and managed it fine up until about 4 years ago. It was then that I started to notice my hair falling out, a lot more than was normal. I also noticed weight gain, increased anxiety, panic attacks, and low energy levels. It was at this time that I began praying that God would sanctify me, body, soul, and spirit, holy, from the verse in 1 Thessalonians 5:23. Sanctify means to become holy, to be set apart. To become holy means you must repent of sin. So I began asking God to show me my sin so that I could be sanctified. Little by little, He began to reveal to me the ways I had kept sin in my life and thought nothing of it, like telling little white lies when it suited me, or being hypocritical. Suddenly, these sins had a huge impact. I felt broken, contrite, sorrowful over my sin. But once I repented, freedom followed and joy. I started to read a book called A More Excellent Way to Be in Health by Henry Wright. It taught that disease has spiritual roots, mainly sin and disobedience. It talked about how so many diseases come from a root of fear, and I really related to that. It talked about fear being sin when not rejected, but rather embraced and followed. A couple years ago, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease. It usually is the progression of hypothyroidism. I was devastated at this diagnosis. I really felt awful in so many ways, physically. I kept praying and researching the roots of disease, and sure enough, I found out that Hashimoto's starts with self-hatred. In fact, all autoimmune disease is the body attacking itself, and this mirrors spiritually attacking ourselves with criticism, hatred, and self-doubt. I was pierced to the soul when I learned this. My mind went back to all through my childhood when I felt embarrassed of how I looked, my features, and I could remember hating who I was, how I looked, countless times, all growing up into my 20s. I felt so sorrowful because God gave me His heart and His eyes to see how much that hurt Him, the one who designed me. And I saw suddenly that it was sin. I was criticizing God's creation for years. How terrible. So I repented, genuinely. And I started to thank God for my body, even the parts I used to criticize. I started to say kind words to myself, say loving words. And this wasn't and still isn't easy in a society of comparison. But I wanted two things: to honor God and to be healed. It didn't happen overnight, but daily I made changes in my thoughts and my words. And I can tell you that right now, I do not have Hashimoto's. And my hope is to eradicate hypothyroidism altogether. It involved seeing my sin for what it was and not defending it, but rather repenting of it and starting a new habit. In it came clarity, freedom, joy, and more love, the love of my Father. This is just one example of how these truths that I have learned are setting me free. I want to share them with people that have ears to hear and eyes to see. Many people don't. Many think that it's ridiculous and would rather stay set in their ways because they refuse to see sin connected to disease. I invite you to listen in prayerfully as I share on my videos. I am asking Yahweh to help me to share his truths with you with wisdom and grace. Tune in for more videos where I share more about these topics, and thank you for listening.